Hello everybody, my name's Paul. I started the DiceyReview.com, and tonight we're going to be showing you how to play a game called The Big Book of Madness. Now this is a game that I had been wanting to get my hands on for quite some time. I missed the initial print run of it because I had foolishly spent my money on other games. I finally was able to pick it up, and I was not disappointed. I want to show you guys how to play it. Anybody who's a fan of Harry Potter or any type of fantasy series like Narnia, things like that, you're gonna like this game, especially if you're a Harry Potter fan though. So we're gonna get into the setup really quickly, and then we'll go over how to play the game. And it's pretty straightforward, so this shouldn't take too long, but I did want to mention a couple things that might be helpful in your setup and your playthroughs. So the first part of setting up is putting the board in the middle of the table. That's done, so let's go on to step 2. Alright, so there's no real set order in getting the table ready, but there are going to be a few different cards that you're going to set out. And there are 4 different types of elements in the game. There's ground, there's air, fire, and water. And what you're going to do is you're going to set up the different stacks for purchase, because you can buy these different cards throughout the game. Now these different level 1 cards, they're what you will start out with mainly. And then there are some other cards that are level 2 and 3 element cards, and those are the ones that you'll set up on the table to get ready. These are the marketplace that you can buy more of these types of cards. So what you'll do is you'll separate the 2 and the 3 powered elements, and you'll put them all out on the table in a stack. And after we're done, we can show you what that looks like. Alright, so as you can see, we've gotten our elements set up, and we've got stacks of 2 and 3 along the top of the board. Another stack of cards that you're going to want to set up is the Madness cards. Now, these will be different depending on how many players you use in the game. The game plays 2 to 5 players. I'm going to be setting up like there's a 2-player game, and for that you'll use 20 cards. So what you would do is you would count out your 20 cards, 20, and you will go ahead and put them in this open window right there, and that's where they'll go, and that's how they'll be set up. Another group of cards that you're going to want to set up is the curse cards. Now I've got these sleeved up because I'm weird and I like to sleeve my cards, but there's going to be 5 different stacks of these curses, and these are the curses that the monsters will put out on the board that you have to try and defeat to kill the monsters in the game. There's going to be 4, like I said, 5 different types of curses, 1 for each element and then 1 multicolored. And so you'll take all the cards that have this colored back and you'll put them out on the table. You'll take all the cards that have the different elements and you'll put them out on the table separately in their own stacks. And like I said, these curses will come out on the board whenever the monsters get revealed as you go through the pages of the book. And when these curses go out on the board, they will be placed in these little spaces down here along the bottom. So now the curse cards have been set up on the right side of the board. They're ready to go. So we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so another stack of cards that you're going to need to set up are these different spells that you can purchase. And now these are different spells that you can take as a player. They'll give you different actions, and they're activated by different types of elements. But what you're going to do is you're going to separate these spells by their power to activate. And on the back of the card, you're going to see that they'll either have 1 symbol, 2 symbols, or the most powerful ones will have 3 symbols. What you'll do to start the game is you'll take each stack of elements, so 1 water, 1 air, fire, and ground, and you'll pick 1 spell of each power. So we'll pick a 1, we'll pick a 2, and we will pick a 3. And you pick those randomly. The game says that you're supposed to shuffle them up, but I just kind of generally grab some random cards. And then you'll set them out next to the board, and the power 2 and 3 spells will be face down, and the power 1 spell will be face up, available for purchase at the start of the game. So I'll go ahead and set those up and you can see what it looks like. Alright, so the next thing that we're going to want to do is set up the actual Book of Madness, the one that you're going to encounter as you turn these pages and find different monsters. There's going to be a number of different pages that you can pick, but there's going to be one that they include that says The End, and this is the back cover of the book, and that one will always go on the bottom. And then there's going to be all these different cards, all these different pages through the middle of the book, and these are the ones that are you're going to encounter these as the game goes on. You'll see there's all kinds of different monsters here. You can see there's different, like goblins and octopus and mimes and things like that. So what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to shuffle these up and pick 5 cards randomly, and these are going to form the pages of the book, and these also correlate with the rounds of the game. So there's going to be six total rounds, and there's going to be a monster that you can face each round. So you'll take these cards, pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're always going to place them monster face side up to form the middle pages of the book. And then there's going to be 4 covers included. So you're supposed to shuffle these up and pick one randomly. And this is always the first monster that you're going to encounter in the game. So you'll see that this one is a little wasp hornet type guy, and you'll fight him first. But what you do is you don't necessarily look at that from the start. You put them all together, and you can see that it forms a little book. And then for your first round, what you'll do is you're going to turn this page over. You see what type of monster you face, and then you see the reward or the negative effect based on whether or not you defeat the monster. So that's setting up the actual book. Alright, there's only a couple more things to do before you actually pick your character. There's all these little element tokens. There's 4 for each, 1 for each different type of element. So there's 4 of the ground, 4 of the fire, 4 of the wind, and 4 of the water. You're going to just place these somewhere near the board where they can easily be accessed. So we'll just put them down here to where you can see. And then there's also a couple of tokens that are included with the game. This little wizard hat will mark the rounds. And you can put it up here on the round spot. And the Roman numeral 1 is the easiest setting, 2 is the medium, and 3 is the hard. So we'll go ahead and just put it on the easy setting. And you'll move this little round marker along every time you reveal a page, and it'll show you how many of the multi-effect curse cards will be revealed, if any. And then there's also this little book token, and this goes around the track to show you which step you are on within the round. So it's going to start off on this success or failure marker right here, and then to start the game it'll go to round 1 and the monster will be revealed. So just to keep things how you would normally have them in the game, I'll go ahead and close the cover of the book so that you can't see it, because you're supposed to be a surprise, the monster that's revealed. But that's completely setting up the board. So we've got all the tokens set out, we've got all the cards set up, we've got all the different spells available. So now the next thing to do is to pick our characters. Alright, so the last thing to do before you can begin play is picking a character. Now, I've gone ahead and I've set up the characters how they are supposed to look to play the game, and I'll explain exactly what I've done for each character so you're not completely left in the dark on how to set this stuff up. What you're going to do is you're going to pick one of the 8 included characters that come with the game. This is one of them. And this is another one over here. There's all kinds of different characters that come with the game. There's 8. And you can pick each one, or you can pick one of the 8 characters to play, and there's both male and female characters that correlate to the different elements. As you can see, this is kind of a wind wizard, and he has more wind cards that he starts with. He also starts with a power 2 wind card. And then this young lady over here is a water wizard, and she starts with more water cards. Now, as you can tell, there are these different element cards with numbers listed next to them. And what this means, this is how you build your deck to start the game. So as you can see, you would take 1 2-power wind card, 3 1-power wind cards, 5 1-power grass cards, 2 1-power water cards, and 1 1-power fire card. And what you would do with those is you would shuffle them all up, and there should be 12, and then you'll draw 6 to do your to get your starting hand. So that's what I've done here. And the same thing applies for these characters over here. So she gets different numbers of cards to start with. She gets 4 wind cards to start with, a 2-powered water card, 3 1-power water cards. So her deck's going to look a little bit different to start off with. The other thing to notice is that each character is going to have their own unique special ability. This one right here says you can have up to 5 cards in support. That's an action that I can talk about here in a little bit. And her card's going to look a little bit different because of that. As you can see, there's all these little shadowed spaces over here, and she has more spaces for her support cards, because this character over here will only have 3 shadowed spaces. They can only have 3 support cards normally. His special ability says during your turn you can draw 1 card. If it's a madness card, cure it, otherwise discard it. So he has kind of a high risk, high reward type ability where he can cure his deck of madness, which is something that can start to happen as the game moves forward. The other thing to mention is that each character is going to get 4 starting spells. Now these starting spells are going to be the same for every character. They'll get 1 combustion, ice, growth, and telepathy. One spell to go with each element, and they will do different things that will help out the group. Growth just lets you draw a card. Ice lets you put a card in your hand into support, and that card can then be used by anyone else to cure madness or cast spells or anything like that. So there's different things that you can do with these spells, but every character is going to start with those same 4 spells. So you can see that this character over here has the same spells. After you've set up those starting characters, you're going to give somebody the first player token, and then you'll be ready to play. So let's talk a little bit about what you can actually do in this game. Alright, as you can see, the board is set up and we're ready to start playing, but there's no monsters out to fight. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about is the different phases within the game. And as you can see here, the back of every character card, there is a reference. There's a player aid, basically, and it'll show the different phases. You have a concentration phase, a monster phase, an action phase, and a recuperation phase. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over each one of the phases. Now, to start the game, you don't normally have a concentration phase, because this phase you're just recuperating the spells that you've used. And to start the game, you obviously haven't used any spells, so you would skip that in the first round. But we'll go ahead and go over each phase so that you get an idea of what happens. So to start us off, we're going to go over the monster phase and talk a little bit about what happens during those steps. Alright, so we're ready to have our very first monster phase. Now, as you can see, the board is empty right now and there's been no pages turned. There's no monster to fight. So at the very start of the game, the monster phase is going to be revealing your very first monster to fight against. Now there's a few interesting steps to follow whenever you reveal a monster. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over what happens when a monster is revealed, and then we'll go over a regular monster phase once there's already one out that you can fight. Alright, so during the monster phase, you're going to take this book token, you're going to move it around this track from number to number. So you would go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. And then once you get back to this reset space, you check to see whether you have failed or succeeded in defeating this monster, and then after that you would reveal a new monster. But to start the game, the token is right here, and it goes to this 1 space to start us off. And whenever this book token goes to the number 1, a new monster is revealed. What happens whenever you do that is you take the top page of this book, flip it over, and you're going to see a new monster appear. Now, a couple things to note whenever you see one of these monster cards. They're going to have some text below them, and that's a revealed effect. So whenever they first show up, this happens. So in this case, this one says each player places the top 2 cards of their deck in their discard pile. So whenever this monster gets revealed, that would happen. Each player would take the top 2 cards of their deck that they haven't yet drawn and put them in their discard pile, which would essentially make them draw madness cards earlier and kind of mill down their deck a little bit. So each player would do that. The other thing that you can see is that there are 3 element symbols listed below the picture of the monster. And those are the types of curses that will be revealed whenever this monster shows up. So what you would do is you would take cards from the top of these stacks and place those curses out on the board. Now, an interesting thing to mention is that at the start of the game, as you can see from this round tracker over here, you're not going to have any multicolored effects come out, any multicolored spells or curses. But later on in the game, for instance in rounds 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the easy track, you're going to have multicolored curses come out. So let's say, for instance, that this monster had been revealed in round 5. What we would do at the end of round 4 is we would move this marker to round 5, and that would mean that before the monsters are revealed, we would put 2 multicolored curses out on the board. So we place them from left to right. We would place the first one here, and then we would place the second multicolored spell in the first number 3 space. And there are 2 number 3 spaces so that you can put out 5 total curses in later rounds. because what you would do is you would put those 2 curses out first. Then the monster would get revealed, and he would show that there are 3 more curses that get placed. So what you do is you would take the curses that are listed, 1 wind, and that would go in the second space of the third the third numbered space there. Then you would take the second one, it would go in space 4, and then the final curse would go in space 5, and then you would have a full board of curses that you would have to try and defeat before the monster could be killed. Now that's just an example of what will happen in later rounds and how the board will look as multicolored curses start to take effect. But what we'll do is we'll go ahead and go back to the initial example of the monster first revealing itself. Alright, so now we're back to the very first round 1, and we've gone ahead and set up the board with how it's supposed to look whenever you set up the curses. So as you can see, there's only 1 curse in the third space here, even though there's 2 spaces for cards right there. And the reason that is that for each phase, whenever you're revealing curses, and when I say phase, I mean multicolored phase and then monster phase. So first you would put out multicolored curses, then you would reveal a monster and put out the monster's curses. You can only put 1 card per space. So for instance, you could, whenever you move your marker down here and it says you have 2 multicolored curses, you would put 1 curse in space 2, 1 curse in space 3. Then the monster would get revealed and you would only be able to put 1 curse in space 3, 1 curse in space 4, 1 curse in space 5. So in this instance, whenever a monster gets revealed and there's no multicolored curses that are going to be put out, you would just put one curse in space 2, 1 curse in space 3, and 1 curse in space 4. That's why the board looks that way, even though there's an open space here. So the curses have been laid out, and the monster has been set up, including his little initial negative effect that he puts on the players. So after that, what you would do is you would stay there and move to space 1, and then you'd be able to take your turn as the starting player. Now, during monster phases later on in the game, you're going to move from space to space at the start of the turn. So say the starting player had taken their turn, and the next player wanted to take their turn. What they would do is they would move to space 2, and if this curse hadn't been cleared off the board by the time player 2 gets there, this negative effect is going to happen. So in this instance, this player would receive 1 madness card in their discard pile. Now, what you can do as one of your actions is you can cure these curses later, but we'll get into that in a second. But that is basically the monster phase. You're going to either reveal a monster, or you're going to move from space 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, etc. And potentially go ahead and take some negative effect if there's still a curse on that space when you land there. Alright, now the next phase of the game is the action phase. Now this is the meat of the game. This is when you as the player will take different actions that will benefit yourself and your team. So the first thing that you can potentially do is you can learn a spell. So learning a spell is fairly straightforward. As I said earlier, there are all of these potential spells that you can buy and expand your knowledge later on throughout the game. And these spells will get you different actions and things like that. Like this one says that you can place 1 card from your discard pile to support. This one says that you can receive 1 card in your hand from another player's hand or from the support pool. This one basically says that you can discard a card and then draw 1 card. So they're kind of more powerful versions of the spells that you already have. But to do this, what you would do is you would discard the number of elements that the spell is related to. So for Stone Skin, you would have to discard 2 ground element cards, and then you would get to take this spell and put it in your little tableau to use during the game. So in addition to Combustion, Ice, Growth, and Telepathy, you would also be able to use Stone Skin as one of your spells. Now an interesting thing to mention is that you can only have 5 spells at a time, so if you were wanting to buy another spell after Stone Skin, you would have to discard one of your other spells that you had previously been using to make room for it. But that's how you buy a spell. And the nice thing to mention is that after you have bought your Power 1 spell, a Power 2 spell would then be revealed and be available for purchase. The cool thing about it is it's more expensive to activate. As you can see, this spell costs 2 elements to activate, but it still only costs 2 elements to buy. So they all cost the same amount, but this one is just a little bit more powerful, and so it's a little bit more expensive to activate initially. Now the next thing that you can do is you can cast a spell. Now these spells will all give you various benefits that will help you or your teammates. Now the interesting thing is that these spells can either be activated once, as you can see, if you pay 1 element you can draw 1 card, or they can be powered up to 3 times. So the interesting thing is, let's say for instance that we had 3 ground element cards and we wanted to activate growth to draw more cards. We could either discard 1 element, 1 ground element, to exhaust this spell, and whenever you exhaust a spell you turn it 90 degrees. For Magic players, you'll know this is tapping, but this game says it's exhausting, so you would exhaust that spell, and you would get to draw 1 card. Now let's say for instance, like I had mentioned earlier, you had 3 ground element cards and you wanted to draw 3 cards. What you could do is you could pay 3 ground element cards, exhaust this spell, and then draw 3 cards because you've powered the spell up times 3. So you can do that with any number of spells or any type of spell. So say for instance you bought this stone skin up here, you could activate it and power it up 3 times as well. Or if you were to buy the more powerful spell below this one, the bark skin spell, you could also power this spell up to 3 times, but you would have to pay 6 elements instead of the 3 that you could pay to power up your 1 element spells. So it's kind of a neat little system where you can make spells more powerful if you use more elements to cast them. Now one quick other thing to mention here is that one of these spells says that you can place 1 card from your hand in support. So support is a pretty interesting mechanic in the game that is fairly prevalent and is used quite often in the multiplayer games. What you can do is you can pay 1 water element to exhaust this spell and place 1 card in support, and once again you can power this spell up if you want to place up to 3 cards in support. But what you would do is you would pay your water element and then you would pick your 1 card that you want to put in support. So let's just say for this example I wanted to put a 1 element fire card in support. As you can see from your player card up here, you have 3 different shaded in spaces where you can put cards in support. You can put 1 right here, you can put 1 right here, or you can put it off to the side down here. Now, what this card does for you when it's in support is it kind of stores it for later use. You can immediately use that card to cast spells or cure curses or do things like that if you want to, but the nice thing about cards that are in support is they can also be used by your teammates. So say for instance, you cast that spell, put a card in support, and then passed your turn. The very next player to your right, or left, I think it goes in clockwise order, the very next player that takes a turn could then use this element card to cure one of their curses, to get rid of a madness card, to cast one of their spells, all kinds of things like that. So what you're doing is you're helping out your teammates and giving them the elements that they might need to cure curses or get rid of negative effects, and then it also helps out the team. So that's putting a card in support. Now this spell down here talks about destroying a card from your hand, and this will come into play whenever you have madness cards, so I'll go over it in just a bit whenever we talk about those. So the next thing that you can do is you can buy an element card, and this is very straightforward and very simple, and this is where the deck building comes into the game. As you can see up here, there are all these different element cards that we discussed earlier in Power 2 and 3 for each element. And what you can do is you can take 2 element cards, or one powered element card and 1 2-powered element card, or whatever, and you can buy the matching element to whatever you're spending. So say for instance I wanted to take these 2 cards, I could discard these 2 element cards to my discard pile, which is over here, and I could then take a 2-power ground element card, so the elements that you're spending have to match what you're buying, and then you put that card in your discard pile for later use. And the reason that that's good is that during during later steps in the game, you're going to reshuffle your discard pile and draw it again. So as you put more powerful cards in your discard pile, you're going to draw more powerful cards whenever you take subsequent turns. Now, this works for any type of element. So say, for instance, instead of 2 ground elements, I had discarded 3 wind elements. What I could then do is take a 3-powered wind card and put it in my discard pile. And the reason that's good is that later, whenever you draw 6 cards, instead of drawing 6 1-power element cards, you may draw 4 1-power element cards and 2 3-power element cards. So you can power up more spells, cure more curses, things like that. So those cards can be very good. Now the next thing that you can do on your turn is you can destroy a curse. And that's all of these cards up here. So as you can see, these curses have a number of element symbols on them. This one has 4 wind, this one has 4 water. These different multi-element curses that will come in later in the game have 1 of each. But what you have to do to cure these curses is you have to discard at once 4 elements that match to cure these curses. So on my turn, if I wanted to, what I could do is I could take 4 1-powered element cards that match the curse that I'm trying to cure. So for this instance, I could take 4 1-powered wind cards, discard them, and you get to go ahead and take this curse, remove it from the board, and place it underneath the curse stack that matches its symbol. And as a reward for completing that and destroying a curse, you get to pick any 2-powered element card that you want to put into your discard pile. So when you destroy a curse, you're getting rid of the curses that might hurt you or your other players, and you're also getting to make your deck a little bit more powerful. Now, the interesting thing about these curses is that, say on turn 1 I cured this curse, the next player would then move their book token whenever they do the monster phase, and they would put it on space 2. But since that curse had been defeated, there would be no negative effect because you removed the curse from that space. Now, if you were unable to remove the curse from a space and then you moved during the monster phase to space 3 and there was still a curse there, you would have to resolve that curse's text. But if you defeat these curses before you get there, you might avoid some negative consequences. So that's the good thing about defeating a curse. The other interesting thing to say is that defeating the curses will defeat the monster. So that's the whole point of the last phase of the game, and what you want to try and do before this book marker reaches that reset symbol up there. You want to try and defeat all these curses, and then that way the monster is defeated. Now, as you can see up here on the right side of the page, whenever the book token gets to that reset space, if you have defeated all of the curses, you get to read the top text and get a reward. And as you can see, there's a monster that's all battered and bruised and has been through the ringer. So if you've defeated all the curses, you get to, in this case, cure 1 or 2 madness cards from your hand or the support pool. If you don't defeat all the curses, you have to go ahead and take this negative effect, which says each player discards their hand, then draws 5 cards. And why that's bad is that whenever you have to draw cards at any time, if you have no more cards to draw, you have to take a madness card from the madness pile, you put it at the bottom of your, or at the top of your discard pile, and then you shuffle all your cards together and draw again. So madness cards are bad because whenever you draw them, you can't use them for anything. They're not an element, so they're dead weight in your hand. And also, if you ever draw 6 madness cards at once, you lose. Or if you ever need to draw a madness card from the stack and there are none there, you lose as well. So madness cards are bad and something that you want to try and keep out of your deck if possible. So that's why defeating the curses and defeating the monster can be very beneficial for you in a number of ways. So, now that we've talked a little bit about defeating these curses and curing them and why that's important, let's talk a little bit about these madness cards and how to cure them. So when it says heal yourself, that's talking about getting rid of the madness cards from your deck. Now, when you have a madness card in your deck and you draw them in your hand, you're going to have the ability to get rid of it from your hand in a number of different ways. So let's say, for instance, that I have drawn my 6-card hand, and one of my cards is a Madness card. So as you can see here, I've drawn a 2-powered wind card, 2 1-power water cards, a 1-power wind card, and a ground element here. What I can do as an action is I can discard any 2-powered element, meaning I could either discard this card by itself, or I could discard these 2 cards together, or if I wanted to, I could discard, a 2-powered and a 1-powered, but in this case, it wouldn't do any good. You would just lose the extra element. What you can do is you can discard these 2 cards, or this card, as long as it equals 2. You can discard them, and then you get to take the Madness card that was in your hand and put it back on the Madness stack. So now this is good in a couple of different ways. Number one, it gets rid of the card from your hand, which is good because you don't want them in your hand. And number two, it will keep the Madness stack with cards to draw so that you don't potentially lose by not being able to draw a Madness card. Now the interesting thing to note is that you can get rid of a Madness card in one of 2 ways. You can either cure it like that, or you can use one of these spells down here that we had looked at earlier to destroy the Madness card from your hand. Now this is still good to get rid of the Madness card, but it's bad for one thing. Whenever you destroy a card, it does not go back onto this Madness stack. It just goes away from the board. It's in limbo. Now sometimes those cards that are destroyed will get shuffled back in and put back in your hand or something like that. But destroying the cards are good on one front because it gets rid of the card from your hand, but potentially bad if it's a Madness card because it doesn't go back on the stack, so you could still potentially run out of Madness cards to draw. So kind of a risk-reward type situation. Another interesting thing to mention is that you can also, if you don't have the cards to cure the Madness yourself, you can also cast the spell to put a Madness card in support. Now, just as these element cards can be used by everyone, a Madness card that's in support can be cured by everyone. So, kind of a neat thing that if you put a Madness card in support, your buddies can cure it. The last thing to mention is you will have a recuperation phase. Now, this is the part of your turn where you will draw your hand up to 6 cards. So after you've used all your actions, and you can use as many actions as you want until you run out of cards, you may only have 3 cards left. In this case, you would draw 3 more cards from the top of your deck, and then you would get to pass the turn to the player on your left. So the other thing to mention is that after you draw your hand up to 6 cards, and you come to take your next turn, is that there's going to be a concentration phase before the monster phase. And this is the one we didn't talk about because we had our starting phase here where we had to reveal our monster at the start of the game. But as you can see, there's a concentration phase where you refresh your spells. So if I've used 2 of my spells, what I'll do is I'll take them and I'll put them face up, and you can see that they are now active and available to be used again. So that's the concentration phase. Alright, so those are the main mechanics of the game. I know there's a few little details that you can find out in the rulebook, but those are the basics of playing the game, and it should be enough to get you started and kind of give you a feel for how to play. You're going to keep on playing and taking actions, and like I said, the way that you win is if you go through your first 5 rounds, you turn over all these cards, defeat all these monsters, and then you get to this last monster, which in this case would be this little mime promo card. If you get to this last monster, you can survive his reveal effect, all of the multicolored curses, and the curses that he reveals. Then at the end of the game, if you defeat him, you win. So after 6 rounds, you try and defeat the last monster, and put all these monsters back into the Book of Curses and survive this this descent into madness that you've had. Overall, this is a blast to play. This one's really great as far as cooperative games are concerned. I will say I played this with my brother at our local game store not too long ago, and there wasn't a turn that we took where we weren't discussing strategies and different ways where we might be able to approach the game differently to make sure that we have the best outcome, the best result. And it was a tough game. We played it on easy mode, and we lost by I think there was 1 or 2 curses left. But it's really tough. I will say with fewer players it might be a little bit harder because your decks aren't as varied. With 3 or 4 players, they might have more cards to defeat a more a more diverse layout of curses and things like that. But overall, a very fun game to play, and one that I would definitely recommend picking up, especially for the $30 to $40 that you can find it in most places. Definitely a lot of fun to play, and like I said, for those people who love the Harry Potter wizard fantasy theme, this game is absolutely top-notch. 100% would recommend picking this one up. I hope you enjoyed the how to play, the instructional. If you have any questions, leave some comments below, or any things that I might have missed. I can definitely make a little follow-up video to address more points. But I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope it was helpful. Until next time, I'll see you at the table.